houses in Decatur, including cottage courts today. Angela is an urban planner specializing in zoning and preservation ordinances, land use planning, legislative analysis, and historic preservation tax incentives. Yes, ooh. It's like watching fireworks. She serves as the planning director for the city of Decatur and is currently assisting with the Decatur Development Authority's Cottage Court Pilot Project. Angela has worked as an urban planner, historic preservation planner in Asheville, Atlanta, and San Francisco. We also have Mark Ethan, Tiny Houses, also speaking. He'll be speaking first. Mark works in the Design, Environment, and Construction Division in the Public Works Department for the City of Decatur. He is responsible for overseeing the plan review, permitting, inspections, and code compliance for all buildings and construction projects within the city. He reviews residential development projects for zoning compliance, oversees the city's high-performance building standards, and assists in staffing the Zoning Board of Appeals. He is a registered architect and worked in the field of architecture and historic preservation for 20 years before becoming the building official. So Mark is going to start. So Mark, I'm going to hand the microphone off to you.
Hi everyone. A little bit more about me. I wanted to put these two photos in because tiny homes is something that goes back in my family a ways. The guy on the left or on the right is my grandfather. In 1948, he bought a Civilian Conservation Corps trailer home that they towed around Wisconsin to do CCC projects. He bought this for $15. In 1948, this is him the day after his wedding. He hasn't mounted the wheels back on it yet, but he towed this 150 miles to northern Illinois to put it on a piece of land that he bought for $125 while they built their 12 by 16, 1.5 car garage that they lived in for 2 years before they finally built their home in the front yard. So I think it's very interesting that this is just kind of something that was done 60 or 70 years ago, but is just starting now to make a comeback. And that the reason he did this was he believed that a person shouldn't have to go into debt to have their piece of America. He believed that why give money to somebody else that you're just paying interest on when you can build it and do it yourself. He even milled all the lumber for both of his houses from some forest land that he had. So I appreciate the tiny house movement and everybody that is interested in this, because I think there is a path to homeownership that's slightly different than what we've considered normal. Just to kind of start, I wanted to just quickly re-review some of the ideas and nomenclature before we get going here. For purposes of the city of Decatur, what our codes and ordinances allow are tiny houses on the left. These are built on foundations. They're built on deeded land and belong to the land in one way or the other. They're, like I said, constructed on piers or foundations. They're considered a permanent dwelling, and residential building codes apply to these. A lot of these great structures you see out in the next door, we refer to as tiny houses on wheels. Again, these are buildings that can be parked on other pieces on someone else's land, whether it be a park or someone that gives you rights or access to their land. Often they're built on trailer bases for transport. In regards to that, they're typically mobile, self-contained, and unless you want the DOT on you or the state troopers, roadworthy. The difference in codes, depending on where you're at around the country, based on my research, is you may be subject to some regulations related to the RVIA, which is an acronym that has something to do with recreational vehicles. I can't remember what the A is, but something in there. And then there is a national standard for modular or mobile buildings called ANSI 119.5. So I do everything on the left. As soon as it becomes wheels, it's no longer considered a building or a structure or dwelling. So we're going to talk about tiny houses in terms of ADUs and also in just general terms of dwelling units. Like anything, we have building codes in the state that are adopted. The city of Decatur has adopted the state codes. We also have some additional provisions, or we clarify things that the state code does not. So as you can see, what we do for most residential structures is the residential building code, international plumbing, mechanical, and electrical codes, and then the 2009 energy conservation code. A couple of other things that we have that are required for all places where people live, essentially dwelling units, whether it be your primary house or an accessory dwelling unit, is we have high performance building standards. What that is some level of certification for anything newly constructed. It could be a house, a tiny house, whatever you want to call it, requires certification for either LEED, Earthcraft, or National Green Building Standard. And National Green Building Standard, you need to have a silver certification. What our standards really require is an enhanced form of energy conservation above and beyond what the state energy code has as baselines. This is particularly important on very small buildings because you can make these buildings extremely tight. They're small building envelopes. They're usually not filled with large expanses of glass. You're able to very easily contain the amount of inside air. And a lot of what the high performance building standards are about is making sure that you have proper pressurization in the house, it goes well beyond R value, it goes beyond, it's just a thermal envelope tightness. And so even more important in a tiny house is to make sure that you are properly treating the building envelope so that it's you have good indoor air quality and you literally aren't making the building too tight. I want to go into a little bit about basic space planning. The main thing that I do want to emphasize here with Decatur ordinances for both dwelling units and accessory dwelling units is that a tiny house is still a house. It may not be 3,000 square feet, but anything that's in the building code would apply just the same regardless of the square footage. A little bit about building planning. Spatial configuration, our size, minimum size for an accessory dwelling unit is 300 square feet. Angela and I were just discussing this before the talk. It's probably a holdover from when we did have a minimum square foot requirement. Now that we do not have a minimum square foot requirement for a dwelling unit, we probably need to look at amending this. If someone wanted to build an ADU less than 300 square feet, they probably would be able to seek a variance through the ZBA for that until we can have the laws changed, the UDO. The building code requires that a minimum square footage for any dwelling is 120 square feet. So we're going to kind of look at that as our baseline for a house. What you're going to see pretty quickly when we kind of put all the pieces and parts together, 120 square feet is a big challenge with the different things that you have to have. We look in the city of Decatur that you satisfy primary functions: living, sleeping, cooking, and bathing. If you can do all that and meet the codes, you can have other features within the space that may not necessarily meet the requirements, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Every dwelling shall have a minimum ceiling height of 7 feet, except if you have a sloped ceiling, you can have down to a 5-foot ceiling, which is about right here, as long as that room with the sloped ceiling has less than 50% of its total area under 7 feet. Bathrooms may have a ceiling height of 6'8". And then an important one is that I wanted to clarify is a lot of the ladders and ship ladders and stairs that are really steep for purposes of serving primary functionaries would not be permitted. Here's a floor plan of a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that's somewhere between 850 and 900 square feet. Some people might call this a cottage. It probably fit into the cottage court layout that Angela will talk about in a moment. But you can see here they've met all the basic requirements for code compliance in that they've got the stairs and the kitchen and the bathrooms. The stairs themselves, although they're winder stairs, based on my review, they would meet code based on the size. And so you can see you can fit quite a bit into 850 to 900 square feet as far as functions and still meet the residential building code. Here's a couple of photos to kind of illustrate ceiling heights in rooms. The photo on the right, you can see it's served by a permanent stair. There's a guardrail at the top of the stair at the landing, which would be required as part of the stair assembly. And then the space inside, I didn't get out my scale, but you can see that there's obviously more than 7 feet of ceiling height, and most of the room probably has a minimum wall height or ceiling height of 5 feet. The photo on the left is more of a loft type scenario that would be considered a sleeping loft. So a little bit about lofts. We do allow lofts in certain situations if you've met all the primary functions within the dwelling unit. So if you've got your kitchen, you've got your bedroom, you've got your bathroom, and a space to live, if you want to create some sort of accessory spaces above other spaces, for storage or for possibly like a small sitting area or a place to sit and do your computing or just have a cup of coffee, we would permit that so long as you've met all your primary function spaces within the confines of the building code. A few things about services. Each house needs to have a water closet, a lavatory, a tub, or a shower. And each dwelling unit should have a place to prepare food. In our accessory dwelling unit ordinance, a space, a carriage house behind a garage would not be considered an ADU if it doesn't have either a full bathroom and a place to prepare food. And usually we see those as a combination of a microwave, a mini fridge, and a sink would be the bare minimum you could have for a kitchen. So if you have one of those and you have a full bathroom, it's considered an accessory dwelling unit. Anything below that would not be meant for permanent year-round habitation. Each dwelling unit shall have an approved water and sewage system. So we see and get questions about proprietary composting toilets, rainwater collection filtration systems, and portable potable water tanks. The first two, if they're design systems and we've reviewed them and they follow the intent of the plumbing code, we would permit those. Portable potable water is not something that we would consider a service to a house. So you have to have some way to get water and some way to relieve sewage, whether that be through a composting toilet or through having a tap into the county's municipal water sewer system. Plumbing fixture clearances. These really cool, I love them, these tiny bathrooms where you practically can turn all directions and get all services, would not be permitted within our dwelling units because they don't meet the plumbing code. The plumbing code requires certain clearances around toilets, sinks, and showers and bathrooms. That doesn't mean you still can't design a really small bathroom and meet the code. It just can't be as small as some of these micro bathrooms that you see on some of the tiny houses on wheels. Egress, you have to have a swinging hinged door. The building code's very specific about this. So sliding doors would not be permitted under egress under the residential building code. You also have to be able to have an egress window if you have a dedicated bedroom. And so the photo on the right, you can see this little cottage has a door and a window to serve as egress. This on the right is a sliding garage door, overhead door, that would not be something you could use for egress in and out of your dwelling unit. They're cool looking and they could be something as a feature in the house, they just can't be the main way in and out. The same would apply for like a sliding patio door. You wouldn't be able to use that as your main egress, ingress into and out of the building. Stairs, these are residential building code as well. 36 inches minimum clear width. Risers can be 10 inches in depth, and or the treads can be 10 inches in depth. The risers can't be any more than 7 3/4 of an inch tall. You have to maintain 80 inches of continuous head height all the way down the stairs, and you have to have fall protection up at the tops of stairs, and you also have to have a handrail. A few life safety features. In the city of Decatur, if you're closer than 5 feet to a property line, which is a lot of properties in the city of Decatur, then the exterior walls closest to that property line will require a 1 hour rating, and they have some limitations for window and wall openings. If the tiny house is connected to a garage, then they need to be separated by a layer of fire-rated gypsum board between the garage surface, whether it be a wall or a ceiling, and the space above. So in this photo here, you'd have to put in some fire-rated gypsum board between the garage and the floor to the tiny house or ADU above. And then of course, smoke detectors and carbon monoxide sensors are going to be required depending on the spatial configuration. And then just some of the frequently asked questions that we get in our office about ADUs or small houses would be, the tiny house require a building permit? Yes. Would be inspected just like any other house. Architectural drawings are required. We do full plan review in the city. You don't have to have it designed down to the nut and bolt of how you're going to put it together, but we do review in advance of issuing a permit so that you don't have it half built, and then you get your first inspection and find out that you have code violations. May I build my own tiny house? The answer to that is yes. The state of Georgia allows a homeowner to pull a residential building permit once every 2 calendar years. That allows you to self-perform the work or serve as your own general contractor. We do require that an affidavit be signed stating that you understand what your rules and limitations are as a homeowner and contractor, and that if you sell a house or structure and move on and try to pull a building permit within that 2-year period, you will not be allowed to do so until that 2 years is up. And then, may I buy a pre-manufactured home or move an existing home so long as it is attached to a foundation? The answer to that is maybe. What we typically do there is we do evaluate if the manufactured home is a shop or a manufacturing facility that certifies their buildings through a certification system and then actually puts a plaque or some identification that's a pre-manufactured home. Because for us in the inspections and building department, we want to make sure that what shows up on site has been constructed and inspected through the process of building it, because oftentimes what shows up is something that is the finished product. So it's okay to do that. We just would have to evaluate what type of manufactured building you would want to start with. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Angela here to talk about cottage courts.
Okay, let me see a show of hands for those of you who joined me in the panel discussion yesterday at 1 o'clock. Okay, that's a good number. So we're going to kind of be building off that discussion from yesterday. Yesterday, we learned that here in the city of Decatur, our zoning code was amended in 2015. We updated it so that we can now allow tiny houses as principal dwelling units, as well as the accessory dwelling unit, but then also this new building type, which is the cottage court. And so this is allowed in a few of our zoning districts. One interesting thing about the cottage court, although it's allowed in, say, our RS-17 or our RM-22 zoning districts, recently in our comprehensive plan update, during our survey process, we asked our residents, would you support a cottage court in a traditional single-family detached neighborhood? And overwhelmingly, we received over 70% kind of approval rating, so to speak, for developing cottage court in our traditional detached neighborhoods. So that's big, and that's something that we're going to explore. Right now I'm working with a resident on this concept where she owns a 1.5-story cottage, very small, and she would like to incorporate that into a cottage court. So there could possibly be another 5 cottages on her property. And you know, I'm trying to show in this illustration here how a principal dwelling, you know, how they can align and create that street wall and be compatible in somewhat in the density and the look and feel of what's existing already on the street. So with our cottage court, I'm going to share with you, so the definition, at least in our zoning code, is to allow between 5 and 9 cottages, and the maximum square footage is 1,800 square feet, but there is no minimum. It can be 1.5 stories, and they're all nested around a shared courtyard. That can be an open, grassy area, it could be a planted area, a garden area, but it's a shared common space. And this is new in our zoning code. I know that a lot of places out west already have this, but we definitely seem to be kind of on the cutting edge, at least in the metro Atlanta area and quite possibly Georgia. But the issue that we're having is that developers are not grasping this. And we see this as an opportunity to create better, affordable housing for our middle incomers. And because the developers, our development community, haven't quite gotten this concept yet, is that the city has taken it upon themselves to show this, that this can be done, that it is a desirable building type. And so I'm going to move here. Okay. So the Decatur Development Authority purchased a property at 230 Commerce Drive. It's about a quarter mile from either the downtown Decatur MARTA station or the Avondale station. It's a half acre, and we hired Bruce Tolar, and if you were at Eric Kronberg's discussion this morning at 11 o'clock, Bruce Tolar is instrumental in the Katrina cottages, and he created the cottage court in Ocean Springs, Mississippi. So he has a good idea of how to pull this together. So we had a design charrette with the adjacent abutting neighbors with the neighborhood itself, and then on the third night, we opened it up to the public, and there was overwhelming support. But during this time, this kind of 3-night process, is that we came up with several different concepts. We took the feedback during each of those evenings, and this is one of the options that was very popular. And so in this particular one, we have about a 580 square foot unit, and then it ranges up to 975 square feet. But another concept we have is one that has about 400 square feet and ranging up to about 1,100 square feet. So there is a range of possibilities and family types that can live here. But let me back up here. So with cottage courts, if you notice on the, let me get my bearings here, 11 on your left-hand side, I've heard a lot of concern, not a lot of concern, but there are concerns with, how do I protect my privacy? I feel too close with my neighbors. But the way that the cottage courts work is that you have your own individual lot. So you're nested together, and so there's a balance between privacy and your public space. So you have a semi-private with your own individual porch and your own kind of fenced-in lot, but then you have your public space where everyone's sharing. So there is the balance that's created. And then also, how do you create privacy between your neighbors when you're inside your house? And this is showing, the house on the right-hand side has a little bit more solidity to that wall, and the neighboring house on the left-hand side would have more windows. So there's design opportunities to create privacy within the development, even though you're living close to your neighbors. Another interesting thing about this property is that it is also within our locally designated historic district. It is the Old Decatur Historic District. It's one of our oldest neighborhoods. And so these cottages will have to take on the architectural character of the Old Decatur Historic District. And so these are some of the examples that kind of look and feel like the Old Decatur Historic District. Let me back up just once. So with this particular property, currently it is zoned R60, and we are going to have to go through a rezoning process to rezone it to RS17, which is one of those zoning districts that does permit cottage courts. But one thing that one of our goals is not to seek any variances. So we are meeting the setback requirements. The other thing with cottage courts is that when it does abut an R60 or a traditional single-family residential neighborhood, that there be a sort of buffer. So with this particular property, it adjoins the R60 on the back side. It's required to have a 30-foot rear yard setback and a 15-foot undisturbed buffer, so that there is a little bit more buffer between the traditional single-family residential. But I want to touch on kind of our situation here in Decatur. If you heard my presentation yesterday, our area median income here in the city of Decatur is $77,202. Of all the new housing units that have been created in the last decade, the median value of those homes is over $416,000. That is well outside the price range of our middle incomers. And so I've been able to talk with different families that kind of match my families that I have up here. The single mom, the retirees, and a two-person household with a young child. And so I've kind of shown here what they can afford, what their maximum housing costs are. And so for our cottage court, our goal is to provide housing for each of these families, each of these types of families, so that they can afford this. And one of the ways that we're doing that is to consider a community land trust. This has been one of our goals for about a decade, is to create a community land land trust, because a lot of the value is held in the land. That's what a lot of our taxes are based on, is the land value. So if a community land trust controls and owns the land that these cottages sit on, that reduces the cost of living there. So then the individual cottages can be purchased at a lower cost, and it can also be sold. And we're looking at doing deed restrictions so that the affordability component of these cottages are in perpetuity, so we don't lose that affordability. So I'm ready for any questions.
Keep your questions in your brain for a second. I'm just going to add some comments. I just want to do a quick survey. Hey, thank you, Angela and Mark. So before we get to just how we're going to do Q&A, just so I can hear your questions, but I'm going to talk for just a couple of seconds. If you do have questions, I'll give you a signal. I would love for you either to come down the left or the right of the aisle so I can bring the microphone to you, and then you can ask your question, and then we can respond. So I just want to do a quick survey. Who is interested in a cottage court type community in this room? Awesome. Who is interested in tiny houses on wheels? Who is interested in tiny houses just on foundation? Awesome. So I guess I don't even know what time it is, and I don't want to go over for our next one. Someone tell me the time. What? Wow, there's a lot. 35 till 2? 25 till 2? Oh, we have plenty of time. Okay, so you know, it was interesting because we sat down with the city of Decatur, and it was just the first conversation. We had the entire planning department in this conference room, and Kim Buchero, my other business partner of Tiny House Atlanta, we just wanted to know what Decatur thought about tiny houses, and then Angela just looked at us and said, well, you know, you can build them here. And we're just like, what? In Decatur? I mean, I knew Decatur's an amazing city, but it just got more amazing. So we were really excited to hear about this initiative, and that what's also got us to do what you see outside and what you're doing in here right now. Because we love the fact that this city is embracing going smaller to answer a whole slew of social impact issues that we feel is so important for our society. So with that, I'm going to stop there. Otherwise, you give me the microphone, I'll keep chatting. So I will open up for questions. If you do have questions, I would love for you to come forward so I can hand you the microphone.
So, two questions, I guess. One I think is for Mark, one I think is for Angela. So you were talking about the prefab houses, the prefab. Is there any intention of maybe creating a list of pre-approved, people that we could go to online and see these builders are already approved by City of Atlanta or City of Decatur, that you can buy from them, and we already know we're okay with them. We already, or do we have to seek them out and then bring them to you and say, will you approve this builder or not? Or that seems like an extra step for us. And then for Angela, I was wondering is City of Decatur doing anything that would make it possible to create a house on wheels that could be a permanent residence? Is there any movement in that?
Just to add one, Ted Maltadis from Georgia Department of Community Affairs spoke yesterday with Angela, and there are a number of idle building manufacturers in Georgia that he is looking to revamp and create inspected stick-built homes that can be utilized throughout the state and the nation. So there are, but again, the fact to have those in Georgia already have that inspector seal on it, that's what we're looking for. And of course, also, it would talk to Angela's points, if it's in a historic district, if it's in whatever district, they're gonna have to be able to fit that type of character of the neighborhood as well. So I'm gonna hand it over to Mark.
Yeah, one thing about sort of the order of development on a piece of land, we always recommend when we meet between Angela and myself and a couple other people in the office, we'll meet with anywhere from 5 to 10 people a week about a development project of any sort. That's the service that we want to provide. We're very accessible from the standpoint that there are so many lots that are already, from a zoning standpoint, up at or at their upper limit, that we like to do sort of what we call a pre-application meeting to make sure that you don't go too far down the road. And because I mean, with a pre-manufactured house, you know, you order it and then it shows up and you've already bought it. You know, a scenario would be that that somebody shows up, or the house shows up, they come to get their permit to set it on the foundations, we find out that there is not enough lot coverage or floor area ratio or something about the site that would prevent you from doing that. So I would always say, if you've got an idea in your mind, or you want to know what your lot can hold, to come see us, and we can tell you, like, if you've got no limitations, or if you have, you're not able to do it at all, or anywhere in between. As far as a list of manufacturers, we typically don't ever, our policy is to not recommend contractors or manufacturers of any specific products, or we even try not to call, you know, like the copy machine Xerox thing. We try to use non-proprietary names as best we can, just to keep everything sort of your choice. So with that said, let me give you Angela for the second one.
So tiny homes on wheels. Okay. So at this time, our zoning code is written that a tiny home on wheels is considered a travel trailer or a recreational vehicle. And at this time, they are not permitted to be used as a dwelling unit, whether it's a principal dwelling or an accessory dwelling. But with that said, if we start receiving input from our residents and property owners that they would like to see an opportunity to, you know, to allow tiny homes on wheels in our neighborhoods, then the Planning and Zoning Division would definitely be open to exploring those codes. I know that a lot of jurisdictions are nervous that if you tweak the code, you might start seeing those traditional mobile homes showing up in their neighborhoods, but there are ways to distinguish the two between a mobile home and a tiny home on wheels. We've done some pre-research, and you know we're capable of doing that, but we just need to hear feedback from our residents before we start moving forward with that. Well, it takes a village. So you gave this speech yesterday about, you know, getting the groups together, getting the neighborhoods together, coming together in support of something, and then we will start exploring that. But it has to come from the neighborhoods. It won't be initiated by the city.
So the power is in your hands.
My question's for Angela. So where is Decatur in the process of the cottage courts? Like, how soon is a reality? And then also, would those lots be sold as single family homes or like a co-op, or how would the ownership be detailed?
All right, so the design charrette finished up in May. Bruce Tolar and his team are running the pro formas because ultimately the Decatur Development Authority will be the developer, and then we are going to put out a request for qualifications for builders and then receive those proposals from them. But obviously with our pro formas, we want to make sure that there's a bit of profit for the builders, make it incentivized for them. So we expect the request for qualifications to go out sometime in August, late August, with the proposals to be returned sometime in September. With building construction, permitting and building construction to completion, yeah, a minimum of 8 months. In terms of the ownership, we are looking at well, again, the community land trust would be holding the ownership of the land, but then the individual cottages would be, fee simple, but then a small HOA, and then we would be looking at the HOA fees. Obviously, we want to make sure that those HOA fees are still affordable. Yes.
Thank you. Most, I think, probably for Angela. You mentioned the demographics of, I believe it was about 77,000 was your median household income, $400,000 homes. Obviously, markets are driving the high standards of these units you're going to build. I come from a community where the median household income is $39,000, and we have a 20% vacancy rate in my community. We would love to be able to allow tiny homes, but we don't have the market to drive the quality standards. What type of zoning regulations or city type ordinances can we possibly use to allow these size homes but still keep standards high?
Excellent question.
So with our zoning code, we used, there's an architect, Ross Chapin. He has put together a series of potential zoning codes that jurisdictions can use. And so we borrowed from his suggested zoning codes. But a lot of it was input from our zoning task force, as well as our neighborhoods, that helped inform us how to write our codes, to see what type of flexibility we need and what areas should be more regulated. Am I kind of answering some of your questions? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I think my question is mainly for Angela. I tried to move here to the city of Decatur a few years ago, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford to buy, of course, and I couldn't afford to even rent. So, when you say your median income is $77,000 and you're trying to get those people in, is there a range that you're trying to get in? And I'm kind of not good with numbers, and I was just trying to think about what's the range of the house, buying the house. What's the range of cost for that, just so I can make it more concrete in my mind.
Go back to my families here. So, yes. So our average home sales right now, depending on what sources you are looking at, it can be anywhere between $350,000 up to, I think even Zillow had something up to about $560,000 as our average sales. But, so at least for our cottage court, we are going to be focusing on households that make about 80% of AMI. But for, say, the purple family here that makes 120% AMI, that's around $96,000 a year. Their maximum housing cost is around $2,300. They can afford a home of $370,000. And that is using kind of that baseline of, housing costs should not exceed 30% of your income. Okay, does that help kind of? Okay. But there is a housing shortage for sure for our middle income families and households, and cottage courts is one part of the answer. And so we have loosened up our code to allow not only cottage courts and smaller homes, but we're also now allowing duplexes and triplexes and quads as well. So, yep. Oh, so for the cost of the cottages, again, we're still waiting on those pro formas, but obviously we want them to be as low as possible. And one of our concepts is showing a unit around 450 square feet, and then the higher end for square footage is 1,100 square feet. And so we're looking at dropping, hopefully, the housing cost down to about $175,000 at the low end. We would love to be able to capture all of these families and be able to cater to what their incomes are.
So the question was, are you saying $175,000 for 450 square feet?
So if you remember, so this family down here, the Green family, is making about 75% of the AMI. We are going to try to cater between the 80% AMI and about 100. So between the Green family and the Blue family, that is our goal. Yes. Not in this particular project. The question is, for those who make less than 75% of the area median income, would not be able to purchase into the cottage court project. Right now, I know these are difficult questions to answer for me, because I would love to see the cottage court appease all incomes, but for the purpose of this project, we would be looking at between 80 and 100% AMI. So those making less, this particular project would not fit their budget.
Can you stand up? Sorry.
Hi, maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but to me, having a tiny home, I think the concept was, look, you don't want to have a huge mortgage or have to be able to save for the rest of your life in order to afford a tiny home. And this here seems to me as if it is like, well, you know, this is the trend now, tiny homes. So let us capitalize on that, and now it is $170,000, $150,000 for 400 or whatever square footage, that you can get a larger home for about the same, or you know, around. And it's like what you call organic, costing more even though it takes less. So I'm thinking this is like taking advantage, for want of a better word or phrase, of people wanting to live smaller, but it's like, okay, now that you're into this, it's gonna cost you more to do this. Could you, do I have this incorrect or not? Because this is what it's sounding like to me.
Well, first off, I'll start with location, location, location. I'm sorry, land value is land value, and that is an issue. Decatur is a hot market. A lot of people want to live here. So that, plus also, no, this is their first project. So I'm going to hand it off to Angela to see what else she can say on that.
So, like I said before, this is still in the concept. We are still running the pro formas. Obviously, we want to get these prices as low as possible so that we can fit all of these income groups. We are expecting those pro formas within the next couple of weeks, and I will be looking very closely at those smaller units to see how affordable they are for, say, the Green family. So I definitely hear what you're saying. I'm on the same boat as you. I want to see these be able to be purchased by those folks that are making 75% or less.
It's like people who, how many people in Atlanta is earning close to 200,000 a year? I mean, tiny homes are for people who are earning, I would think, under 100,000, you know, 30, 40, 50. Some people are earning 20,000 plus a year, according to one of your statistics from your people.
So the purple family is making 120, it's about 96,000. The blue family is making, the city of Decatur area median income is 77,000. And then the green family, it would be 75%, which is it around 58, roughly? So, yeah. Okay, we have 3 minutes, so I'm gonna, okay.
It's an admirable goal to have some low-income housing or affordable housing here. I'm a resident of Decatur in a smaller house, a tiny house, and we're paying really high taxes. So my question is, would this land trust be exempt from property taxes? Would this be a net loss for Decatur? The rest of us absorb the cost of property taxes for this today.
So The community land trust would absorb the taxes for the land. The buildings themselves, the cottages themselves would still be taxed. Yes. But that's what makes it affordable.
All right, well, we are out of time. Thank you so much for attending. The next session is with Ryan Preston and Mario Cambardella of Sustainable and Social Impact of Tiny Houses, starting here at 2 o'clock. Thank you so much.